Hi guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here. Today I'm going to show you how to create a cute ring dish using some nasturtium leaves. So you're going to need two that are roughly the same size. They don't have to be exact, but very similar to each other in size. And I want you to take these stems and just make sure to clip them off. You can use your nails or you can use a scissor or something like that. Put those off to the side. You're also going to need some white polymer clay that's been rolled out to about 2 millimeters thick, as you can see here. And I've just got some pieces on there that I want to get off. There we go. Okay, and I want you to take your largest leaf, just press that on enough that you can see how much clay you're going to need, because I want to cut away some of our excess here. Don't cut away too much, you want to leave some room. Okay, but just cut away a comfortable amount of the excess, but don't cut away too much. Okay. Then I want you to take a piece of plain printing paper, 2 pieces to be precise, and just lay your clay in between them like so. And then I want you to burnish, and this is just going to get rid of any lines or creases that might be on it. Okay. And it's just going to smooth out the entire surface in general. Repeat on the other side. Then just check to make sure that you have smoothed out all the areas that need to be smoothed. And this one's got a little piece of sand in it. Get rid of that, because you don't want that in there. Just smooth that out. Okay, then this side's alright, so now I'm just going to check the other side quickly. Okay, and there's just this bit over here that I want to smooth. And that will do. Alright, now remove it from the paper. And now I'm going to be using alcohol inks. So I'm going to be using a variety of greens. I've got lime green and rainforest green in the Pinata ink line. And then some fall colours with the sunbright yellow and tangerine. Okay, now open these alcohol inks away from your clay, because the ink dries around the lids and can crumble, and so if you've gone and opened it near your clay, you can get the crumbly bits onto your clay, and that doesn't look very sightly. Okay, there we go. Right, so now we're going to be colouring the clay, and I would recommend doing one side at a time. So before we put the ink on, I want you to take some alcohol blending solution. You can also use isopropyl alcohol ink, not alcohol ink, alcohol, but just make sure that it's no higher than 80%, because otherwise it's going to cure the clay a little bit and it will cause it to be brittle, which is something we don't want. So you can see there that I got a little bit of the alcohol ink crumbles onto the clay here. It's not a huge issue, but that's why I tend to avoid going near it. Okay, then once you spread that around, take your ink. And I'm going to start out with the green here, the darkest. Spot it on. Then I'm going to go to the next colour. And so on. Okay. There we go. Then I'm going to use a brush. You can use your finger. But if you don't want staining, use a brush. So just brush this ink around. I start from one side and I'll work my way around. And I'm just busy swirling around, like so. Okay, and you can see those colours kind of mixing together. That's what I want. Okay, and then make sure to do the sides. I'm just going to dry off my brush there. Okay, and I'm just making sure that the sides are coloured. Okay, then allow that to dry until it's basically completely dry. You don't want to be able to see any moisture on it, and that is going to allow the ink to absorb into the clay, and that means later on, once we press our nasturtium leaf in, we're going to get the veins and everything, then we're going to bake it, and then we're going to sand it so that we sand away a lot of the excess ink, so we're going to get a lighter version of this, and then the veins is going to be nice and dark. You'll see what I mean when we get to that point. You can also use a hairdryer to do this. I have a heat gun and it's on a very low heat setting, so it's not going to cure the clay, but you can use that to try and cure this quickly, like so. Okay, now it looks, it's kind of dry, but it's still a bit sticky. So what you want to do now is grab a brush, make sure that it's dry, and then I just brush across like so. And this is just going to assist in the drying. Okay. Then when we've done that, I'm going to bring over a piece of paper and I'm going to burnish this. And this will get rid of all of the excess ink and also move any scratches that we might have in the surface. And there you can see how that's removed excess ink. And now it might not be completely dry, it might be a little sticky still, that's fine. Now you want to take your leaf of choice and try and get it so you get everything. Okay. And by the way, you always put it the back side of the leaf down because that has the best veining. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to burnish it thoroughly into that clay. Like really burnish nice and hard. You want this pressed into the clay as much as possible. You can even use an acrylic roller to roll over the surface. I'm just going to press that that's stuck in nicely. Okay, there we go. Then I'm just going to trim away this excess, because this is going to be the final shape of our leaf. So make sure to trim it with the shape of the leaf. And just do that the whole way around. Okay, there we go. Then go around the sides and press down so that you give them a light bevel. Like so. Okay, there we go. Then I want you to lift this up. So keep the leaf in place, that's very important. And then I would clean up this excess ink if I were you before laying it down again, because you don't want this getting onto your leaf. It just is a risk not worth taking, so just quickly wipe it up, like so. Okay. Then you can see here what colour of clay, what colour of ink we need to use. So this will be the orange side, this will be the red side, green side I mean. But before we do that, I would advise giving it a quick burnish again, just to smooth it out. And also pay attention to the sides, you want to burnish those just so that they have a nice bevel rather than a clean cut look. Like so. Okay, and this time I'm going to put the ink on while it's on the paper, and there's two reasons for this. One, and the most important one, is the ink will soak up the paper will soak up the excess ink, and secondly it means that I can lift it up and inspect this side and rub the ink that I need to on that side without it sticking to the tile. Because if you put it down on the tile and you try to move it around, you might find that your leaf on this side lifts up. So keep it on a piece of paper. Okay, so we'll do exactly the same thing. Spray that alcohol on, rub it over the surface so that you get a nice clean cover, and there you can see the paper's already soaking up excess. Okay, and then just apply the ink like last time. Okay, then once you've done that, lift this up, take another piece of paper and replace the previous one so that it can just dry up any excess ink that might be there. And then take your other nasturtium leaf, and you can see that this one's a bit smaller, which is fine. Just place it down and burnish that one in as well, and I'll show you what to do with the outside, because since this is a bit smaller we need to decorate the areas where it's not covering. If you can find two that are the same size, then that's the best thing to do. But more often than not, you're not going to be able to. Okay, and there we go. Good. So then what I would advise doing is doing something around this edge that makes it look good. So let's see. I think I'll use this kind of sponge texture. You can use sandpaper as well to go around the edge, and when we sand, this will be highlighted. Okay, and just go around the entire way. Okay, we'll lift this up, and you can see on this side we also have a little bit of excess, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press those as well. Now you might notice that I'm pressing against it rather than down onto it. The reason for that is because I want to push it in if possible, and I also don't want to flatten the texture on the other side. So just press against it like so. That's generally the best way to go. And this is another reason why working on a piece of paper at this point is nice, because it means that you can just move it around like so without having to worry. Now check this side, make sure that we didn't smooth out any of the texture, and then we can apply it to our bowl. And this is the bowl, so I like to take the largest leaf's side, and I like to gently press that into the bowl like so. Now don't do it too hard, you don't want to force it in there. Go nice and slow. Like so. And just continue going until you're happy with the shape. Now this side we can lift up, and there you can see what it looks like, but we're not going to lift the leaf on the back, and the reason for that is because we will now avoid shiny spots, because if we have a leaf on the back preventing contact with the bowl, it's going to mean that the back side doesn't get any shiny spots, which is nice, which means we won't have to put it back on, we won't have to do any major sanding on the back, we will just get the nice true imprint, which is what we want. So now I want you to take this and bake it for a full hour at your brand's recommended temperature. Mine is Primo, but you still will bake it for an hour no matter what brand it is. And then when it is done, I'll show you how to get it out of here, and then we can proceed to sand it a little bit. Okay, so once it's out of the oven, you'll then pop it into a sink of cold water, and it should pop right out. So this side you can see is quite nice. It has dulled a little bit. The alcohol ink always goes a little bit dull in the oven, which is fine. I really quite like the matte effect and the fact that the colours aren't too bright. That's perfectly fine. But what we have to do now is we have to remove this leaf. And so what you're going to have to do is, if you can get it to peel up, that's always great. But you might have a little bit of trouble, so you just need to go slowly and peel it up. And if you want to avoid this, you can always take the leaf off before putting it in the oven, but then realize you're going to have shiny spots, which is something else that you're going to have to deal with. So all you're going to have to do is just use a cloth of some sort, and you can very easily remove it. It's really not that difficult to remove. Generally, if you get into this middle spot and peel up these veins, you can get quite a bit of it off, but you're just going to have to rub it off. Doing it under a tap in a nice soapy bath would help, but as you can see here, it really comes up quite quickly. Okay, and here is basically what you should be left with. Now, you want to give this a quick spray with some isopropyl alcohol. Any strength will work, but it's basically just going to be to clean off any leftover plant material on here so that it's nice and clean. Because there is some left in the crevices. But there we go, that's all clean. And there we go, you can see how pretty that looks. Right, so now I do want to actually antique the inside. I'm not even sure if I want to sand this, it turned out so nicely. So I'm going to grab, this is some acrylic paint, and this is burnt sienna. Okay, and then I'm going to grab some carbon black. And it will probably be about 3 parts sienna to 1 part black. And I'm just going to quickly mix that in together. And it will create this really nice kind of burnt brown effect, which is the colour that I like. And I think this is a little dark for my liking, so if it is, you can always just add a bit more sienna, so probably make it about 4 parts sienna to 1 part black. I'll just mix it in. And there we go. Much better. Okay, and there we go. So now the last step is I want to grab some water. Let's see if I can find that bottle. A little bit of water here, and it's not really working for me at the moment, but I just want a little bit dropped on there. Okay, and then I'll just mix that in. So I just want it to be a little runnier. There we go. Then take a brush, and I'm going to do it on this side first, and I want you to brush that in thoroughly. Make sure that you get into all of those veins, and I'm like really scrubbing in here to make sure that it gets into all of those areas. And just do that for the entire bowl. And don't worry if the paint starts to dry, it actually has to dry quite a bit before we can remove the parts that we don't want. So if it starts drying, that's what you want, so don't worry about it. Okay, and then I'm going to do it to this side as well, I've decided. Okay, and here we are. So it's starting to dry. It's a little tacky still, but it's starting to dry. It's dry enough for us to start working with it. So what I'll do is I'll run my hands over it just to make sure that I smooth in all of those crevices. Do the same on this side as well, because your fingers can get into places as well. And it also will remove a lot of the excess paint, as you can see. And just clean off your fingers, and then we can move on to drying it with a rag. Okay, now I'm using a rag that I use specifically for this, so it's quite dirty, as you can see. Basically, you just go over the surface and you burnish quite thoroughly. Do not use a wet cloth because it will reactivate the paint and will result in you not getting a nice antique effect. Use a dry cloth. Okay, and there you can see how nicely that's coming out. Now we're going to have to sand a little bit later on to get the fully realised effect, but you can see how nicely that pattern's starting to come out. So repeat on this side. Okay, and here we go. So now you want to make sure that your paint is pretty much dry before you move on to this next step, so no shiny spots. And I want you to take a 600 grit sandpaper. You can go higher than that, but I wouldn't go lower because you're going to sand away too much of your piece if you do that. And then I just want you to slowly start working the piece. And it will go slowly in the beginning, but that's fine because you don't want to overdo it. If you over sand it, you ruin the alcohol ink and you remove the pattern. Going slower, therefore using a higher gritter sandpaper means that you're more controlled in what you're doing. So you can see there how much brighter that is than it is on this side. And of course that's down to the colour being brighter, but here let me sand this side and show you. There you can see a patch that I've sanded there, looks better. So I want you to start with a 600 and then go up to a 2000 so we get a nice shiny finish. Alright, and here it is. So you can see it has a really nice sheen to it and it has brought out the colours. Now if you want, you could sand a little bit more heavily on the green side to bring out those veins a bit more, but I kind of like how it goes from being kind of not very noticeable, the veins anyway, all the way to the side where they're like really bright in contrast, which is really nice. It adds an interesting effect. So we want to now quickly seal this paint, and I'm just going to use some Renaissance wax. Now you don't need a very strong sealer because the paint is all in the gaps, and we gave it a sand and a buff. We gave it a sand and we'll give it a buff, and so any paint that would get removed from just general use has been removed because of the fact that we gave it a good sand. If you didn't give it a good sand, then you would need to use something a little bit more protective, such as maybe Varathane, but I find that that sort of a gloss doesn't really work because this is kind of a semi-organic rustic piece, and so although we're going to be giving it a nice shine, I don't want it to have a super high glossy finish. So I would recommend using wax, but then you do need to give it a decent sand so that there's no paint or lingering alcohol ink on the surface, because that will get rubbed away with time. Okay, and so I'm just rubbing over a thin layer of wax. You don't want a thick layer because if it gets into those cracks it will turn them a milky white, which is not what we want. Okay, and there we are. Then we're going to give it a quick buff. So I'm using a Dremel 3000 to buff. And that will do for the front, and you can see here how it's given it a nice sheen. Now I'm going to do that for the back. Okay, and there we go. That's it, all finished. So now if you don't want this super shiny finish, all you need to do is take a rag and you can just run the rag over the surface, and this will just bring the shine down a little bit. It's not going to bring it down a lot. If you don't want the shine at all, just rub the Renaissance wax on and use a cloth to gently buff it in, but the buffing wheel is going to give it a nice shine, which is nice because it will highlight all of the pores and veins in that piece. So now I just want to show you this close up, If you look carefully, especially in this yellow area, you can actually see how the leaf was furry. And because we left that leaf in and then we didn't touch it afterwards, the paint has now highlighted those furry bits, and so it gives a really beautiful, organic, realistic effect. So if we bring over this one as well, you can see those furry edges. So it really is a wonderful project. It looks fantastic when it is done. Keep in mind you can do this in all sorts of different colours. I would personally use at least 2 different colours. So for instance, in this one, if you didn't have that many colours, at least use a green and a yellow. The orange looks really nice, but if you just did it in green, it would look alright, but it wouldn't stand out nearly as nicely. And if you did it in orange, again, it wouldn't stand out nearly as nicely. Having this kind of transition between colours really helps make it stand out. So I do hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I certainly did. It's a great ring dish. It really doesn't take a lot of effort to make. It's a really nice quick project and would make a great gift for someone you like. And basically it's just a really fun project. And so if you liked it, please let me know in the comments below. And if you would like to support this channel so I can continue posting videos like this one, please do consider becoming a patron. I'll provide a link to that in the description below. That would be super helpful. And as always, I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.